So hello, my name is Blase Kearney. I am really, really excited to be here to be able to talk to everyone. Working with community organizations and community like Detroit Will Breathe has been kind of the dream for me since I was in law school, and I wanted to be part of and start a public defender office that participated in movement building. And so, I've gotten the opportunity to do that here with NDS Detroit. And to be able to work with you all is really, really exciting. It's not something public defenders have a history of doing, especially here in Wayne County. And it's very rare nationwide for something like this to happen. So I'm sort of beyond elated to be able to work with you all. The Neighborhood Defender Service of Detroit is a organization that is contracted with Wayne County to represent 1 in 4 people who is charged with a felony in Wayne County, both in the city of Detroit and then all the way through the circuit court process, beginning to end. We do trials. We don't have the same lawyer represent somebody right through when they're come to be assigned at our office all the way through what happens. So one of the advantages of having this kind of institutional public defender that's trying to do something different than what came before is we get to see we're kind of on the ground, and we get to see a lot of numbers, and we get to see trends and see how all the players are reacting to these changes. So I guess I can start off by explaining what a CCW is and why it is, why we saw this rise in it, and why it struck us as so strange to occur in the middle of the pandemic. So, carrying a concealed weapon is a crime that some judges call a regulatory offense, and I call it a regulatory offense because there's no real underlying problem that society faces relating to it. It's a statute that regulates not whether or not you can own a firearm, but how it is that it is being carried, either openly in public or in a vehicle. So carrying a concealed weapon only applies to people who do not have their concealed pistol license, which is a problem because the Wayne County clerk has not been processing concealed pistol license applications during the pandemic. And in May of 2021, they were sued for their failure to do so. So this is a problem especially faced by folks here in Wayne County. A CCW occurs when you do not have a CPL, and if you have the gun on your person, and it has to be completely visible. The Detroit police will arrest people if you have a jacket that is a little bit too long that covers up, even if you have an outside the waistband holster and you're open carrying. If your winter jacket covers a part of that gun, I've seen people get arrested for that. I had one client who was a custodian at a middle school, and she got off of work late at night, and so she would have her gun with her when she would go pick up food from the Coney Island. And so she was waiting for her food. She got out of her car. She had an outside the waistband holster and a jacket. And while walking into the Coney Island, the police were watching her, and they arrested her because her jacket covered part of the gun. So this is a gun that was legally purchased and legally registered to her. That's a 5-year felony. So that's how CCW, if it's anything other than completely visible and there's no discernible argument that you are concealing it in any way, that's how the CCW happens for carrying it on your person. The other way a CCW can happen is in your car, and this one is even like more hyper technical. If you don't have a CPL and you want to carry a gun in your car, you have to do 4 things. First, you have to break the gun down, which means it has to be unloaded and the magazine needs to be separated from the gun. 2, you need to put it into a case that is designed for the storage of firearms. So you have to get a gun case for it. 3, you have to put the gun in the trunk of your car. And if you don't have a trunk in your car, let's say you have a pickup truck like an F-150 or something, or older F-150, you can put it out of the reach of the driver. And then 4th, it has to be stored separately from the ammunition. So the ammunition needs to be not in that box. If you don't do all 4 of those things correctly, you're committing a 5-year felony. So those are kind of a strange crime to see someone be charged for, not properly storing their gun inside of a car. We've all seen people who get arrested for having a stolen firearm, right? Or having a firearm that is not theirs. That's not the vast majority of these cases that we were seeing. When the pandemic started at the 36th District Court, we started seeing a massive influx in people coming in the door charged by the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office with CCW. And when we're talking about a lot, I'm going to get into the numbers here in a minute, but we saw a dramatic increase. And so the court system, just to give you like a anecdotal sense of how the court dealt with this, they ended up creating a whole special docket at the 36th District Court, run by the chief judge. Chief judges generally have a lot of administrative tasks to do. They typically, a lot of times they won't have full dockets on their own, but the chief judge took this docket where they were just hearing about between 30 and 50 CCW cases a day. And this problem has ballooned to where there's thousands and thousands of these cases that were in the court system. We also saw that the day in between when the person got their first day in court after their arrest started to balloon, whereas the law entitles you to have one within 14 days of your first appearance in front of a judge. We saw that extend to be more than 100 in late 2021. So people were waiting more than 3 months for their first day in court. And this affected everybody else's proceedings too, right? Because all these CCWs were clogging the docket, there was massive delays in everything from, no license, you don't have a license or insurance to, other low-level felonies to even the more serious crimes where people were detained in the Wayne County Jail. So in 2020, we saw this happening. There was a fellow at NDS named Eli Feasley, who I think is on this call, who started crunching the numbers and looking at what we could get from publicly available databases to quantify this increase. And we ended up drawing numbers from 3 different sources. The first source is publicly available arrest data. That's from DPD. And it's really important to emphasize, all DPD puts on their website is arrest data. We do not have data for the times they do not find contraband, right? So we have no idea how big the scope of well, I think anecdotally we all know there's a big problem, but we don't know how frequently they're stopping people and finding absolutely nothing and just harassing people, which is going to be important when we get to the race data in a minute. So with this publicly available arrest data, we could also compare the internal data, the Neighborhood Defender Service, that we were given by the Assignments Office and that we're keeping track of to do our work. And I apologize for the siren. The third set of data is court data. So there's court data from the Third Circuit Court that can give us information about who is being charged and what those trends are and what percentage of all of the Wayne County prosecutors' work these CCW cases became. We presented the information to Kim Worthy in September of 2020, and pointing out that we had this problem with CCWs, in the hopes that things would change, that there would be an enforcement policy, there would be something different. What ended up happening is there's this diversion program that they started, I guess, loosening the criteria for. That was really, really messed up, in my opinion. And I should say a lot of this stuff is my opinion, not like the broad opinion of NDS. But what would happen in a typical CCW case, you get pulled over, you own your gun. I had a client who had the gun in a glove box, did everything else right. It's just the place it was stored was not in the trunk. And that person was arrested. They were caged for 3 days. Their boss did not know where they were. Their children did not know where they were. And thankfully, my client had an understanding boss. So when he came back after 3 days saying, where were you? He could give an explanation, and that explanation didn't result in him losing his job. That's not the same for everybody. But then you're waiting months and months with this thing hanging over your head. God knows if you're trying to get an adoption to go through that's being held up, whether or not you're a security guard who needs your gun for your job and you're not allowed to own one during the pendency of the case, and just the kind of psychological pressure that like having something sitting out for years and years puts on someone. They'll come to you and say, okay, we're going to give you diversion. And what diversion is you are going to have to do a number of things. One, you're going to have to pay us money. depending on how much they sometimes will give you $600 in court costs, sometimes it'd be $300, sometimes it'd be $1,300. And you have to keep your case open for another year. So whatever's going on in your life, if the case being open is messing with your life, you have to deal with that for another year. And here's the bizarre part. We're going to require you, in order for you to take advantage of this, to give your gun to the Detroit Police Department, to forfeit your firearm, which is going to be also important for a thing I'm going to talk about in a second. So the result was this diversion program that required forfeiture of the firearms, extraction of wealth from the community, for something that it's a regulatory offense, a technical regulatory offense. So about the numbers, what ended up happening is that there were, on average, before the pandemic happened, there were about 250 arrests per quarter that the Detroit Police Department did, about 1,000 arrests a year for CCW. And, once the pandemic hit, that number skyrocketed. It quadrupled. So you had people then that the Detroit Police Department was arresting over 1,000 people per quarter, 4,000 a year for CCW. And that became a problem because when we looked at the demographics of what was occurring, this problem was only happening to Black people, only. From NDS data, 96% of our clients that are charged with CCW are Black. When the pandemic started and these cases skyrocketed, we saw a tripling of the number of clients being referred to us for CCW who were Black. For our clients that were not Black, that number went down. So during the pandemic, enforcement from the cases getting assigned to NDS went down for white people and of other races and went up by 205% for Black people. So there was obviously something that was going on that was only affecting one particular part of the community. Now, keep in mind, this is the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, right? You're talking about a county that's only 40% Black. You're not, it is so dramatically disproportionate that 32 out of every 33 CCW cases are being brought against Black people. And that is in, these are cases that are CCW only. There's no other charge. These people do not have a serious criminal record. There's no other charge that's accompanying it. No other contraband is found. No, you don't have insurance on your car or whatever, because they'll use those as pretext. They don't really care. And so that's what's going on. And it was dramatic. And we, had presented that information to the prosecutor, and their response was, well, we'll make diversion easier to get. Now, I think one of the big things that we came across is when we started bringing this story up and started bringing this up to the media, is the media kept wanting to know why. Why is this happening? And we have the data and we can present the data. And I thought it was weird because I felt like people have this impulse to want to explain it, to contextualize it, right? I want to label something. I feel more comfortable with this information if I can just say, oh, this was the George Floyd related protest. This was just the pandemic. Something changed. But the fact is, this has been going on for hundreds of years, or ever since Reconstruction started. In 1881, in Bibb County, Alabama, this is from Slavery by Another Name by James Blackman. Here, let me pull it up. All right, New Year's Day, 1881, in Bibb County, guns carried by Black men were becoming an increasingly potent issue among white Southerners. Public campaigns were underway to ban the possession of firearms by any African American. In an era when great numbers of Southern men carried sidearms, the crime of carrying a concealed weapon, enforced almost solely against Black men, would by the turn of the century become one of the most consistent instruments of Black incarceration. The larger implications of disarming Black men at a time when they were simultaneously being stripped of political and legal protections were transparent. 1881, Bibb County, Alabama. 1941 in Florida. This comes from a Florida Supreme Court case, a concurrence in one of those cases, talking about another CCW. They didn't even change the name of the statute. It's called carrying a concealed weapon. It's the same crime. This is from this case called Watson v. State. The act was passed for the purpose of disarming Black laborers to give the white citizens in sparsely settled areas a better feeling of security. The statute was never intended to be applied to the white population, and in practice has never been so applied. We have no statistics available, but it is a safe guess to assume more than 80% of the white men living in the rural sections of Florida have violated this statute. There has never been, within my knowledge, any effort to enforce the provisions of these statutes as to white people. Skip forward again. Now we're going to talk in 1986, Coleman A. Young. This is from James Foreman's Locking Up Our Own. Coleman Young said, "I will be damned if I'll let them collect guns in the city of Detroit while we're surrounded by hostile suburbs and the whole rest of the state where you have vigilantes practicing in the wilderness with automatic weapons." Coleman A. Young could have said this in 2021 about what was going on in 2020. Bibb County, Alabama, 1881, exact same crime. This concurrence in this Florida court opinion, saying, like, kind of directly saying what's happening here is that this is about making white people feel safe, right? And so I think that Claire had this, sent me this map. I don't know if Claire could share the screen or not. I apologize if not. But there's been, when we look at the data, where this stuff is happening, we can see that it increased double over the entire city. In any particular police precinct, they were doing more than double than they were pre-pandemic. But you can see where the big red dot is, the 100 dot that's in here. That's downtown. And I think if you go to the next slide and then the one after that. Yeah, so this is Greektown itself was the place that saw the highest increase, 330 arrests in Greektown alone, a 7-fold increase in the CCW arrests. What happens in Greektown? That's where people from outside the city come to hang out, and that's where people who also live in the city go to hang out as well. And so when I read this 1941 Supreme Court opinion from Florida that says that these laws are really more about making white people feel more secure, we're seeing the exact same thing happen. So to kind of like make my overall point, when journalists ask us, why is this happening? I think the better question is, why are things that happened in 1881 in Bibb County, Alabama, or Florida in 1981 or 1941, or the problems Coleman A. Young was saying in 1986, why are we dealing with those in Detroit in 2022? Why hasn't that, like, the underlying reason doesn't change, because no matter the political context, this particular problem, using gun laws to, disparate enforcement, has been going on for more than 150 years. So that's kind of the overall point. Thank you, Claire, I appreciate that. So I think that there's a couple things that have happened. One, the Third Circuit Court has converted the Coleman A. Young Municipal Building into an annex court to help process CCW cases. Kim Northey has not agreed to dismiss all these cases, which we've asked her to do. And right now we're staring down the barrel, no pun intended, of about 3,800 of these CCW cases that are clogging up the court system, that are jeopardizing everybody's rights, constitutional rights in the county, who could be incarcerated in the Wayne County Jail trying to get a trial, because the sort of resources are being dedicated to try to figure out what this problem is, when Kim Worthy can make it go away tomorrow. She could wake up and dismiss all of these CCW cases, and we wouldn't have the backlog for the court and people locked up in the Wayne County Jail. Their problem would become appreciably easier to deal with. And so I think that there's a lot of work to be done going forward. And as the institutional public defender, we're uniquely positioned in the middle of this to see everybody and see what's happening. But we need the community's participation so we can work on this together, to address this together. This story's gotten a lot of traction, and I'm very excited to work with you all, because I think that with enough public pressure, that we can actually create a dramatic difference in the enforcement practices. Because James White and the police chief and Kim Worthy, the prosecutor, have made a number of statements where they're throwing each other under the bus. And they're trying to throw the former police chief, James Craig, under the bus. And so everyone's trying to run away from this story. And I think it's because, it's bad. It's really, really bad what has happened. And now that we have the goods, the data to prove it, we can keep pressing them and hopefully get these CCWs all dismissed.